Hey everybody, it's Doug here. I just wanted to make a little video just because I feel like procrastinating essentially. I really don't feel like doing the dishes and I really don't feel like doing laundry at the moment. While I was waking up and getting into the shower this morning, I looked at my calendar and I saw that it was already the middle of September. And for me, this pretty much signifies that in about a week, I'm about to hit my first year in the field of nursing as a registered nurse. And I'm a pretty, at least I used to be a pretty introspective guy. I used to like to think about, what things have I learned? How can I use those things to help me for the future? What do I still want to know? Those kinds of things. With that being said, I've kind of compiled a list of 7 things here, and I'm sure that it'll kind of offshoot me into even more here. But I'd like to talk about some of those things right now if you guys will give me some of the time. So things that I've learned after 1 year in nursing. The number one thing that I've learned is that school only prepares you for so much. Any diploma or bachelor's, accelerated bachelor's to master's, whatever program that you go through related to nursing is only going to get you so far. It's only going to get you, in theory, the fundamentals of what you need to know in order to perform this job safely and at least effectively. Now, most programs out there today, at least from my knowledge and from what I've learned talking to other people in the field, have really just hammered home, the fundamentals of nursing and, basic pathophysiology, or in regular terms here, how a disease or an illness process goes in the body, like how it happens, and then how it goes and affects the rest of the body. Pharmacology, so the most basic of medications that you'll use and how those work on the body and those different, illness systems or pathways, I should say. And that's pretty much it. This is pretty true, I think, for any job that you go into. It doesn't even have to be nursing for that matter. You're going to learn more on the job during training or orientation than you ever learned in school. School was just, like I said, supposed to give you that background that you need in order to effectively, start off your job and have the tools at your own disposal to know the basics. Now that you at least know those basics, now you're going to build on top of those into your various, specialties or disciplines so that you can become the best at whatever you do. So what I do right now is that I work in a ICU. It's basically a glorified MICU. Do I regret going into the ICU right after graduation? Absolutely not. Would I go into the MICU after graduation if I had the choice? Probably not. I think that it would have been more beneficial for me to go into a surgical ICU, preferably a surgical trauma ICU, because those are the kind of patient populations that I've come to see I wish I would have interacted with on a daily basis, as opposed to people who go into MICUs who are, essentially ridden with chronic issues that have all kind of stockpiled on top of each other and gotten out of hand in terms of management. So they have to come to the hospital and be admitted to take care of those things. Those things, these patients, especially in their physiologies, their disease pathologies, have taught me a lot about how to put together a overarching picture. And I will say that from when I was in school, that's one thing that I've always been pretty decent at doing, was taking a step back from the situation at hand and trying to put together this overarching picture of how each piece of the puzzle makes the picture, essentially. How does their history of the high blood pressure along with the diabetes or the COPD, how does that all relate to what's happening right now? And why does it matter if I do one thing over another thing? Now, I will say a majority of the time, I don't have to think that crazily, but there are a lot of times when I have very complex patients with very complex histories, and you have to kind of think about things one step at a time before you can even begin to turn the next page and start to put together the next pieces of the puzzle to see the big picture. It just doesn't really work out the way that you want it to all the time. And that's not even just for nursing specifically. That's for pretty much any field that you go into. The second part of this tidbit about school only preparing you so much, I've been a big fan of this mindset for about I would probably say since the end of middle school throughout high school and until now, at least, just for the rest of my life. Adversity is always going to be the best teacher. Now, what do I mean by that? Any leader or anybody who works in management or, industrial organizational psychology or psychology in general will tell you that you learn the most from your failures rather than your success or successes. I don't know if that's truly the way to say that with its plural word. Regardless, though, it's true, guys. I'm not going to beat around the bush and tell you that, oh my gosh, yeah, from all those times that I did such a great job, I learned the most. I learned the most on the job when I was drowning. That wasn't, of, my own accord. It wasn't of my coworkers' accord. It wasn't of the provider's accord. It wasn't the patient's fault, nothing. Patients that I took care of, at least when I was on orientation, and I was on a 3-month orientation for just for background information, were incredibly sick. I can't say that I started at the beginning of COVID because I did not. That would have been basically the beginning of 2020. I started at the middle to end of 2021. I started in September. Now, when I went to tour my soon-to-be home unit in July of last year of 2021, I met some of the people that I would be working with now. They were all very nice people, great people, seemed like a great culture on the unit. And it didn't seem like they were all that busy at the moment. So I was like, you know what? All right, it should be a pretty clear-cut idea of what the unit's going to look like. When I had my first day on the job in September, it was a 180 from what I had experienced in July. We have a 14-bed ICU. They are on 2 different floors. So there's 7 beds on the bottom, 7 on the top. Every patient on every floor was ventilated. On the bottom floor, 3 of the 7 patients were on ECMO. 2 of those patients being on CRT, so the continuous dialysis therapy. And there are even more continuous dialysis patients upstairs. So everybody was pretty much COVID positive. And if you were unlucky, they were COVID positive along with being C. diff positive or having some kind of other precaution that they had to be on. So you were gowning up and putting on an N95 into pretty much any room that you went into. If you were lucky, maybe you had one patient that wasn't ventilated. Maybe it was one of those Airvo patients who just really, they weren't ready to be intubated, but they were still not well enough to go on to a nasal cannula. A lot of the things that I learned on orientation set me up for success down the road, at least to where I'm at right now for hitting my 1 year. I'm not saying that it made me an expert. That's not even close to what I'm saying. There's still very much so a lot for me to learn. But it definitely helped me become much more confident because of how many times that I had gotten just beat down. And I remember specifically that there were 2 weeks in January, 2 sets of shifts. They were 1, 2, 3. I was off for 2 days and I came back for another 3. I had to intubate my patient 3 days in a row. So I did it on, let's just say, for example, it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I was off Saturday and Sunday. I came back for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I intubated again on Monday. That made me, 1, not only stressed out, but 2, very, very comfortable and familiar with intubating patients and the process that comes along with that and the procedure that needs to happen. It always taught me to look out for what kind of things I have in my room currently, what kind of access do I have on my patient, and then really trying my best to just hammer home the patient's history in my mind so that when the providers come in the room and the anesthesiologists come in the room, I'm not the one who's caught with my pants down. I have been caught with my pants down one time, and I know this time specifically. I'm going to take responsibility for it, but also it was just an emergent intubation that we really didn't think was going to happen. And there were other things precipitating this intubation that were kind of just delaying me preparing better than I should have prepared. But that's just also on me from maybe just having a poor time management on that shift specifically. To tie into this piece that I've learned here, one of the funny things that I always find people, no matter what field they're in, whether it be medicine or engineering or STEM or education, whatever, the group of people who have experience tend to believe that the new hires or the new cohort of the team seem to have it easier than they did previously. Now, to some extent, in some regards, this may be true. And that's one of the things that I think is just a part of the human experience, is that subjectivity usually, at least a majority of the time, will trump objectivity. So what does that mean in just simple terms and understandable terms, right? Subjectivity meaning the way that we feel or experience things versus objectivity, which is the way that it actually happened factually with no emotion interjected at all. Do I kind of believe that I had it a bit more difficult than some of the people who were hired after me? In a lot of regards, I do, but this isn't me blowing, smoke to make myself sound better and sound cooler to everybody who's listening to this right now. I promise you that is not it. The difference between the people who started after me and when I started with my coworkers who started about 2 months before me, we started with patients who truly were having COVID-related problems tied into their comorbidities. After COVID and stuff had kind of blown over, our unit became, like I said, this glorified MICU, because originally it was a respiratory ICU, and we were really focusing on the COVID stuff because no other units in the hospital except for ours and one other one that was a pop-up unit were accepting these patients into a COVID ICU. Anybody who was COVID positive would either be sent to these designated floors, but if they needed ICU care, they were sent to us or that other unit. I was getting the sickest of the sick. Unless they were a transplant patient or, post-op for, really post-op for transplant, I was still getting the sickest of the sick patients. These people who are just incredibly sick to the point where, they're on the brink of death every day. For my coworkers who had started after me, they were getting these patients who, in my opinion, majority of those patients were step-down patients, and some of them even were floor patients who I think that were truly just the providers downstairs in the emergency department mismanaged, along with the bed supervisors, sending these patients to the ICU. They really didn't warrant ICU care. Like I said, I still don't know everything, and I'm not a bureaucrat. I don't work in administration, although I do hope to work in administration one day, which I'll get into later on in this. They just weren't getting these high acuity patients that were going to prepare them really well. I noticed that they were struggling a lot with tasks that I had at least become pretty familiar with and relatively efficient with after the first month. And they were on longer orientations than I was. Again, if any of these people are listening to this right now or watching this, this is not me coming after you. This is not me speaking negatively or badly of you. This is just me comparing experiences and evaluating things that got me to where I am right now. So these times where the cohort after me had lower acuity patients, it definitely made me thankful that I started off at such a weird and high stress time, as interesting as that sounds. Because you learn so much from those, those 4 days in a row where there's 4 shifts, I should say, in a row where you had to intubate somebody, or, having people who are just, they're just, they're channel kings or queens in their rooms. I hate using weird lingo, but what I mean by that is, they have 2 pumps in their rooms for their medications, and then all of those, they have 4 channels on those pumps. So here's your brain, which is what controls the medication administration. Then you have medication here and here. So you have 2, then you have 4, then you have another one, so then you got an additional 4. So they're on all these different fluids, are on medications, or sedatives, or paralytics. So you learn very quickly how well some sedatives work for people and how well they don't work for people. How well you find out, paralytics work on people as opposed to not others. In addition to medications like vasopressors, which will help raise blood pressure, and the medications that help to lower it. You learn so much with people who are so sick, at least taking care of them. That was one thing that I was incredibly grateful for, because when people were having, a really hard time with these patients who weren't exactly the sickest, and they were just really, really task heavy, right, with their care that they had, I was able to go and assist usually a good amount of time with those nurses, just because I was so decent at having my own stuff put together that I was able to go help somebody else, which made me feel better. But that's that. The next thing that I've learned is that we sacrifice very simple things for the sake of our patients. I think I've learned this on day shift pretty well, just because there's a lot going on during the day shift. You have family members there, you have the attendings there, you have physical therapy, occupational therapy, nutrition maybe, all these different disciplines or people who are a part of the team who require at least some portion of your time during the day. Sometimes they require more than others. Sometimes they require a little bit less. Things like going to the bathroom, drinking water, having a snack, sitting down, and taking a breath to just decompress for a moment. Sometimes a lot of those things just go out the window. There are a lot of days where you're going to say, you know what, after I go do this one thing, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And then here goes another 5 hours by, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even go to the bathroom. You forgot all about it. Or maybe you suffered through not going to the bathroom, I don't know. Or, you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to drink some water, but then something happens in your patient room, you got to run in there, and by that time everything's over with. It's time to give report, and your mouth is as dry as a desert. That's why gum has become my best friend. Eating, sometimes I've seen people just starve themselves. I was one of those people. I would always be up and moving during orientation. That was one thing that I really struggled with, was sitting down to just take a moment to sort through everything and really prioritize. Sometimes my patients were just really, really sick, and it wasn't my fault, but there were other times where I wasn't learning to... I'm trying to think of the word here. It starts with the C. It's not really combined, but you have to learn how to block things in this field, especially in the ICU, because a lot of your patients can be incredibly task heavy with the care that they require. So blocking off your care and chunking it is so important, and will prevent you from hopefully going crazy, because you will be on your feet all the time, all day, every day, if you don't learn how to effectively consolidate your care. That's the word I was looking for, was consolidate things. Also, another thing that I've learned is that we need to learn to grow a thick skin. And you need to learn to grow a thick skin, especially if you aspire to be in leadership or in management. And by management, I don't mean just a unit charge nurse. I also mean relief charge nursing, because a lot of the patients who have family there, or the patients themselves who can be difficult, if the family decides to be difficult and everybody kind of gangs up on the nurse, I've seen a lot of people that I work with kind of just succumb to all the pressure from the patient or the family. And it hurts, mainly because at the end of the day, The nurse is a person. They're a human being who deserves respect, fair treatment, and kindness, towards them, just the same way that they do it towards the patient or the family members. Growing a thick skin, I think, was that's why I put it in the top 3 here, is one of the most important things that I think you could ever learn, not only for this job, but in life in general. I hate to say it, and I hate to go on a tirade, so I'm not going to do that. But being soft in life will get you absolutely nowhere but walked on. You have to learn when to pick and choose battles, for sure. But also, you need to learn when to stand up for yourself. For me, it took a couple of times of just having patients not really belittle me, but just be unruly and ridiculous, quite frankly, with their requests, and disrespectful for me to say, that is not okay, and you are not going to treat me that way. And if we have further issues with it, we're going to have those addressed by somebody higher up than me. And about 8 months into being on the job, I started relief charging. And then I had experience with being on the other side, as in the mediator between the patient and the nurse. And with those situations, the patient was usually in the wrong, or the family was usually in the wrong. And it took me being professional, but also very foot down, clear cut, and concise, that if we do not act the way that we are supposed to act, and if we don't treat the care team with respect all the way around, then we're going to have some further issues here, and you're not going to be allowed to come to the hospital anymore. Not the patient, but the family specifically. And usually this hammered the point home. While some people were frustrated and they like to call names or do whatever, I don't get paid enough to sit there and have you berate me for the next 45 minutes. I mean, I got to watch on. I can see what time it is. I've got other things that have to be done. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you berate me. I don't get paid enough for that. I don't get paid enough for you to treat me with disrespect, because I don't get paid enough to treat you with disrespect. There's no amount that you could pay me to treat you with disrespect. I'll always be nice to you as long as you're nice to me, and I will do my care quickly and efficiently so as to not bother you as much. Like I said earlier, I do have aspirations to go into healthcare administration, higher up in the hospital, maybe be a chief nursing officer or a director of some unit. With that being said, those people are going to take the brunt of everything. So if I can take whatever brunt now and handle it effectively, it's only going to prepare me better for what comes later on. The fourth thing that I've learned was to utilize PPE no matter what, no matter who your patient is, no matter how comfortable you are with them. It's kind of funny because whenever I have family members who have kids for the first time, or they go and hang out with people who have kids. Kids are petri dishes. That's no surprise to anybody. They put their hands in their mouth. They put their hands everywhere. They touch everything, etc. And they get sick easily and all the time. When I went to college, something similar was happening. I was in a new environment with people from essentially all over the world who had different habits or tendencies or whatever. I got sick quite a bit in college too. Working in the hospital, especially the ICU, is no different. People there, especially in the ICU, are very, very sick with a lot of problems. Some of those problems you can get yourself if you don't protect yourself. There would be moments where my patients were confused or agitated and ripped off their oxygen and were desatting. At least in my mind, excuse me, I didn't think that I had time to scrub my hands with hand sanitizer, put on gloves, and then go and put the oxygen back on the patient. So there are many times, including recently, where I ran in the room immediately and put the oxygen back on the patient, and then scrubbed up and put gloves on to redo or reassess something else that needed to be done. But at the same time, there's just no reason for me to sacrifice my own personal safety for somebody else. I have gotten COVID, the flu, MRSA, cellulitis, all from working in the hospital. And it sounds gross saying that all now, but it's true. There is no reason for you to not take the littlest precaution to help yourself when taking care of sick patients. So do those things before you end up, like me, colonized with MRSA and suffering from, flare-ups which knock you down and then you have to call out of work for a couple days. It's quite annoying, but it's also frightening at the same time, knowing that this is something that I'm just going to have to deal with for the rest of my life, because honestly here, dealing with these flare-ups is miserable. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's very annoying. It takes a lot out of your normal routine. So I just am recovering from one from recently that had occurred. I mean, like I said earlier in the video or the audio, whether when you're listening to, I have laundry to do because I haven't done it. I have dishes that are stockpiled that have to be done. It just takes time out of your day. It takes time out of your life. Case in point, excuse me. Just do the simple stuff that's going to keep you healthy. That includes, finding things outside of work that you enjoy and that keep you sane. While I am a mental health advocate and proponent, I am very different in the way that I like to vocalize it nowadays. Back in the past, I used to be a very big proponent of, wearing your heart on your sleeve so that everybody knows who you are. You have no poker face and you're not bluffing anyone. Everybody always knows. As time had gone on and as I had settled through my own problems, which I don't really need to get into now because they're not related, people really just, at least from what I've noticed in my experiences, people more so just get annoyed when you're always complaining about something or always talking about your problems. It gets old after a while, and it always brings the energy down in whatever you're doing or whatever you're a part of. Therefore, if you truly need help in those situations, please, by all means, do not be afraid to ask for help. But also, number two, you have to be willing to accept that help and willing to use the techniques or strategies that you're learning from friends and family, as long as they're positive coping experiences or coping strategies, of course, or from therapy. But if you don't utilize what you're learning, or if you're not really learning what you're supposed to be learning from these sessions, then you're wasting your time. Because seriously, nobody wants to hear you complain forever. I definitely have been complaining a lot recently. Work has become a very big part of my life, as I feel like a lot of people have noticed. It just becomes a big part of your life because you're there for a certain extended amount of time regularly, every single week of every year or every month of every year. There were a lot of things that were happening on my unit that were changing the culture to where I was internalizing a lot of those things and it was making me miserable. So I was becoming a person who was miserable to be around at work. While I was helpful, at least I'd like to think that I was helpful, is when, it warranted it. I would just join in on these gossip sessions and it would never really get us anywhere, if that makes any sense. I will say that when I was in orientation, I had a lot of different hobbies that I took part in. I went disc golfing a couple times when the weather was nice. I mean, being in the South, the weather is usually always pretty nice unless it's raining, because, there's never snow. I was doing stand-up comedy. I was doing these podcasts. But as, patients got sicker and sicker and I internalized more and more, and I just got so burnt out from working, especially on the day shift, a lot of those habits just kind of dropped off and I became upset. I'm not going to say I was in a state of depression, nothing like that. Was I? Maybe. I don't know, but it just sounds dumb to talk about something that happened already and I can't change what happened. I'm here where I'm at now. Definitely was bummed out a lot being in a new city by myself with no family around, but and friends who I would see but worked different shifts from when I worked, so it was just a matter of lining up schedules to get to be able to see each other outside of work. Life was definitely tough, but I mean that's just a part of it. There's no way around it. So you have to find those things that keep you sane, whether it's gaming or whatever, or going out and exercising or reading. I really did start reading as well, and then semi recently, I'm gonna say in probably November or December, I started screenwriting a little bit as well. I have an idea for a television pilot that I really, really hope that I can wrap up here soon and just at least be somewhat confident in it to go and get it evaluated somewhere professionally. You have to think outside the box to help yourself. Like I said, I'm not the biggest, mental health power champion advocate guy, but I try my best not to swear in this episode, but I'll just be kind of point blank with it. Do shit that actually makes you feel good about yourself and is going to make you forget about work. Because I'm going to tell you, you do not get paid to do work outside of work, and you're not getting paid to think about work outside of work either, especially that second one. Do stuff that's going to make you happy or that you enjoy, as long as it's not detrimental to you. Things like smoking, drinking, binge eating. I think that it's fair to say, with me being in the demographic that I am, which is a young 20-something-year-old guy, a lot of my habits from college, at least now that I'm starting to get a tad bit older, are starting to kind of fall off. But in the beginning, when we'd go out and party, or go out to the bars or whatever, old habits didn't die hard. Drinking was definitely a thing. You just drink to excess. There's really no point in it. I really don't see the point in doing that stuff anymore. Even with when I would have, these reunions with some of my friends from college who would come down to visit, it's just, I definitely noticed that I wasn't able to keep up the same way that I could when I was in college. I think that working just takes it out of you. And I think that working nights especially takes it out of you even more, to the point where you barely have anything left in that battery. You can't just, you have 25, you're operating, let's just say, a 30% battery life, as opposed to the 80% you were operating on in college. It's just not the same anymore. To piggyback onto that as well, working night shift makes life vastly different from how you've lived before. Now, for me, this may be different than somebody else who works night shift in a city like, say, Las Vegas, where everything is 24/7 and the city just definitely doesn't stop. Being in the Bible Belt, thumper South, it's very different down here. Hell, even in college, I was able to go to a grocery store 24/7. There was one that was off campus, about a 7-minute drive, but it was 24/7. The pharmacy off campus was also 24/7. Bars were open until late hours in the morning. You could do whatever you want. People were always up ready and down to do whatever. And then you could still wake up the next day and it was still the daytime. You could still go to, whatever you got to go do shopping wise. You can go see people, make drives, visits, doctor's appointments, the post office. Well, being down here and working nights where everything closes at pretty much 10 o'clock, unless it's a club or the hospital. Oh man, I cannot emphasize to you how tough that is, because think of it this way. I work 3 days a week. Yes. I get thankfully lucky, if I work those 3 days back to back to back, if I do it in one single block stretch, right? But the days that I don't are the worst. Let's just say I work 1 day, then 2 days, and then I'm off the next day. I'm not going to stay up all day, because being sleep deprived is definitely not fun. There have been a couple of times where I've successfully done it, but successfully, I think, is a very loose term to describe how I did it. I stayed up for the track meet. I worked Friday night. The track meet was, on Saturday morning. Well, I stayed up all day after I got off of work Saturday morning, all the way up until about 5:30 in the afternoon on Saturday night. And I can't even describe it to you unless you've truly been sleep deprived before. I was just loopy. I had loose lips. I just was saying whatever I really wanted to say. Just couldn't focus on anything. And it was just, I just didn't feel great. And to make the matters worse, I was in the hot sun all day long. I got sunburned. I was in the burning sun all day long. While I was keeping hydrated, yeah, and I was eating a little bit. Just, it's not worth putting your body through that. Not even close to it. But I was able to do that because I wasn't going to work the next day. Well, what if these days of, like I said, I work one day, then 2 days, then I'm off one, and then I go back? Why would I want to throw out my sleep schedule because of just one little day? So if you're lucky, you technically are off only 2 days a week, because for me, the way that I do my sleep schedule for work weeks where I work everything in a row, I will sleep all day the day before so that I can stay up all night, go to sleep in the morning the day of, sleep during the day, and then go to work at night. And then the day I get off where I don't have to go back, I either will stay up until about 12 or 1 in the afternoon and then sleep, and then take medication to go to sleep again when I wake up at night so I can sleep throughout the night. And then boom, that's just, those are 2 ends of the days, or 2 days at the ends of those shift blocks that are just gone. So I don't have those anymore. Whether that's, I wanted to go and see family, or I wanted to go and take a trip somewhere. Yeah, shorter amount of time to do it, or you can do it in that same amount of time, but you have to sacrifice a lot of sleep. And I will tell you, sacrificing sleep and wanting to go through things that are fun do not mix very well. Very tough indeed. I'm looking at how much time I've recorded so far. I've done a pretty solid half an hour. I think now is a pretty good place to stop, because the more that I go on, the more that I'll probably just start babbling. I think I did a pretty good job of staying on topic and focus for this one in particular. But I'm going to upload this to YouTube, guys. If anybody there who is watching or listening is in nursing school, or is beginning their nursing career and has a question that you think that I could answer for you, guys, I'm an open book when it comes to these things. I'm always usually pretty transparent too. I'd love to help you. Just reach out to me somehow, whether it be through social media or a comment. I'd love to help you. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon in the next one when I have something else that's cool or interesting that's on topic. But until then, I do want to say that I appreciate you tuning in, and take it easy. We'll see you soon.